We're going to start in 1 Corinthians 10 tonight. And it's going to be a little different kind of a message. We'll be sharing some principles. There'll be some verses throughout. But starting 1 Corinthians 10 here. And just read one verse by way of introduction in verse number 31. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. Give you a second to turn there. And in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31, it says, whether therefore ye eat or drink, or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God. Wish I had time to really unpack the context here, but verse 31, 32, and 33 is somewhat of a summary of the previous 3 chapters. And he basically says, here's the conclusion. Whatever you do to the glory of God, don't give an offense, and then aim to please for God for other people's profit, that they might be saved. And a lot of that he was talking about putting aside his liberties for the sake of others, setting aside some of those things. You know, there's such a big push in Christianity today, and we love to throw around the word legalism and those things when we're talking about, hey, let's not be a stumbling block. Let's try to be an encouragement and a help to others. And but a real important emphasis here in verse 31, which really, it is a standalone verse as well, taken out of the context, and that is, in all of our life, this is a biblical principle all throughout, we must do all to the glory of God. We talked about that this morning. You're not your own, you've been bought with a price. And so that is a passage that we could really apply to all areas of life. And tonight I want to talk about, as we've been talking about contemporary issues, I want to talk about what the Bible has to say about social media. And of course, there was no social media in Bible days, so we have to look at principle. And we'll look at some principles, some guiding principles for our use, for our children, and to consider some of the blessings as well as some of the dangers associated with social media. And I hope that'll be a help to us tonight. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, I ask that you would help us this evening, and that we would have this conviction that whatever we do, that it may be done to the glory of God. That you are concerned with the little things like what we eat and drink. And that everything that we do can be to glorify you, but could also be to dishonor you, to be a stumbling block for others. I pray, Lord, you help us tonight to develop some balance in our life in this area of this thing that's not going away, that we may use it to glorify you. I pray that you help us. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. You know, it's been interesting to see the transition, the cultural shift that has revolved around technology. Ryan and I did not grow up with computers and iPads and iPhones. We're old. Of course, there's some in here older than us even, but it's amazing when you think about like our children growing up, they never knew a time without that stuff. I remember my parents, I was probably 10, 12, when they bought, it wasn't even called a computer, it was it was basically a word processor that hooked up to the TV. And that was a pretty cool thing. And I was like, man, it's not a typewriter. This is cool. I did full reports on a typewriter. How many of you have done a report on a typewriter, right? Get out the whiteout, right? Because once it's typed, it's on there. Man, got to go back and try to line it up. I filled out a job application with a typewriter. You try to line up everything, right? And you fill it out. And how different times are, right? Now you can take a picture of something, and it can make a Word document out of that picture. It's like, this is crazy, the technology today. In fact, so much worse. I don't know about you, but it's getting a little concerning the way AI is going. I mean, you could frame people today very easily. That used to be stuff just like the CIA could do. And now it's like any one of us can steal someone's voice and someone's, I have that reading app, Speechify. You ever try Speechify where it'll read a document to you and things, and you can choose the voice. And I picked Barack Obama's voice, and I had him read the book I wrote. And it was really hilarious. and in the book, it talks about, I'm a Christian, and this is my perspective and worldview. And when Obama said, I'm a Christian, and this is my perspective, I was like, this doesn't seem right. But anyways, it's amazing. It's amazing what you can do today. But, there were a lot of pastors and there were a lot of ministry leaders early on that were really trying to take hard stands. And they would preach so dogmatically against some of this stuff. And it's funny because you fast forward and all of a sudden, they've now got a Twitter account, or they've got, these things. I knew of a pastor that he was blasting another very well-known, very influential pastor who has a Bible college and all that. He was blasting him for having a Twitter account. And just really just saying, this guy's a compromiser, all this kind of stuff. Fast forward, this guy, and he's a good man. He's on the mission field today, but you know where he updates everybody? And he's all of his stuff going on in the mission field on Facebook and Twitter, okay, and maybe some other areas. All I'm saying is it's amazing how times change, right? We try to be dogmatic about something that isn't necessarily good or bad in and of itself. Some things, let's just face it, they're not inherently evil, though they may be used for a lot of evil, right? I remember I had an electric bass guitar at one point, and that was actually my MOS in the Army when I first joined the Army, electric bass guitar player. It was a 02 uniform was my MOS. And I remember selling this electric bass guitar when I was in Bible college. And one of my friends said, I can't believe you would put that stumbling block in front of somebody. And I said, an instrument is not inherently evil. It's how you use it. You could, by the way, you could take that piano and play all kinds of ungodly music. The piano is not God's instrument, right? Much like anything else. And so, an artist can take paint, and as long as that paint is in the jar, it doesn't have a sense of morality. But once he dips the paintbrush in that paint and puts the first stroke on the canvas, it now is taking on morality. It's taking on a form. Just like I can pluck a random note, and that one note by itself doesn't really do much. But as soon as I add another note, it takes on a feeling. And it instantly starts painting a picture, you see. And so it's what's done with it, right? What are you going to do? So you can take the same paint and build a beautiful sunset. You can take the same paint and build something pornographic or paint something. It's what's coming out of that heart and the talent of the artist. And so similarly, we've got social media. Let me say, there are some pitfalls in social media. There are some dangers out there. I've seen marriages destroyed. I've seen young people taken astray. I've seen read stories of young people getting fallen prey to a predator because of social media. I mean, there are some dangers out there, but there are some blessings. And I just want to say this: it's not going away. I'm waiting for that whole internet fad to go away. Then it's not going to go. It's not like the pet rock. Okay, it's not going away. That was an '80s reference. I remember the pet rock. Okay, anyways. But it's as time goes on, we start to realize, and it starts to kind of morph into something. And I want to challenge us with how we use it. I remember when I first started, I started doing social media and social networking back in the MySpace days. I remember MySpace, right? That was the beginning. And I was like, you can make your own website just for you. I was like, this is so cool. And you know what? They didn't censor your speech, and they even gave you a song. But anyways, it was different. But then it went into Facebook, and it started going into these other things. And Facebook, of course, is really interesting because that started out as a college networking thing at a university, and it blew up seemingly overnight and got incredibly big. But the reality is, people see you there, and things that go out. Let me just give this caution: things that go out on the internet are going to be there forever. I remember years ago at the last church I was at, we had Governor Dunleavy in, and it happened to coincide with Good Friday. Now, as a Baptist, we really don't do anything special on Good Friday. That's like a Catholic thing, really. I'm not opposed to churches that do something on that day, but it's just, it's a Friday. And but anyways, he was in town, and he was doing his doing his tour, bringing his budget stuff to the people and allowing for questions and this kind of stuff. And we had one of the larger venues, so they asked if they could use our auditorium, and so we let them use that in the middle of the day. And there was a local newspaper article that was blasting me. The pastor of this church on Good Friday is having the governor come in and they're saying, whatever happened to separate church and state, and yada, yada, yada. And, he's having him speak on Good Friday. And then they go to my social media posts and say, he said this, and he's all these quotes of me. I was like, this is crazy. Like, I've never had an article written about me ever. By the way, that tells you you're doing something, right? They start writing articles about you. But that's when I started to realize, like, man, everything you put out, they're going to find it. And you better be careful with that. the first time I realized what an impact social media can make is I was at a pastor's conference, and folks come up to me, and we'll talk about the networking and things and some of the blessings with that. But guys I knew just sort of loosely because they were my quote-unquote friend on Facebook, right? These are my friends. And but I was at this conference, and several people came to me and they said, I really appreciate the stuff you post. You're always encouraging. You're always being helpful. And I never really thought about it that way, like that's what my goal was. But I started to realize this makes an impact, positive or negative. And it caused me to start being a little bit more aware of what's going on. With any kind of technology, there's pros and cons, but one thing's for sure, it'll reflect your heart. It's a reflection of the heart. It's a place where I can present my heart to the world. And it's kind of funny. It's a place where people who may be more introverted by nature kind of can come out of their shell. And this is how I feel, and this is who I am, and I can have a voice, and those kinds of things. And so we need to be careful with that. Titus 1:15 says, "Unto the pure all things are pure, but unto them that are defiled and unbelieving is nothing pure. But even their mind and conscience is defiled." Perversion and sin with online activity is not a reflection of the technology, but it's a reflection of the person's heart. And so with that, we need to consider this thing of, is God's glory our central desire? How are we representing ourselves? Because there is a world out there that's looking. There are believers that are looking. There are unbelievers that are looking. How are we presenting ourselves in this world? And so this is something to really be thoughtful about. And by the way, ask yourself this. We have some young parents here. Your child's not of age to have a Facebook account. But think about this. Have you established online or social media philosophy in your own home? Think about it. Think through it. What would be a philosophy that we might adopt, or a purpose statement, mission statement, whatever you want to call it? It doesn't have to be super formal and plastered on your wall, but have you ever given it thought? You see, very often with this kind of stuff, especially for those of us that hit us kind of fast, many times we're more reactive than proactive. We noticed our child went down a hole that we never wanted them to go down. But guess what? Now they've been exposed to it. And now we have to be reactive and pull it back. How do we now adjust to this? You see? Rather than being proactive about it. And I'm not saying that is the end all and all, that they'll never have any issue. We need to be diligent about these kinds of things. But social networking really has become enormously popular at a very rapid pace. As we talked about how quickly Facebook blew up, and I believe there's 1 billion people on Facebook, if I remember right. And then of course you've got all the other stuff. TikTok has become huge. YouTube, by the way, you know how YouTube started? YouTube was a dating site. It was one of the first ones where you would put a video introduction of yourself on there. And it became so silly that people started watching them because they were so funny. Then they started including videos of cats, and the rest is history. That's where YouTube came from. It's kind of funny. But we've got all these different things, and each have their pros and cons, and whatnot. I will say this: if your child is in something you don't know anything about, spend some time and figure it out. Okay? I think we can make a couple mistakes. I think one, we can just assume it's innocent, and that's a big mistake. On the other hand, if it's something we don't know about, we think it's automatically evil. Well, we don't do that because I said so. And you know nothing about it. All the kids' friends are on it and all this kind of stuff. What I'm saying is, as a parent, make an informed decision. There are all kinds of great Christian blogs and stuff that dive into some of these things. They hear the pros and cons that I've found, and a lot of folks have really done some research and whatnot. And don't just trust one person's opinion. Do the research yourself and figure out what's going on there. And Ephesians 5:15 is a great verse for this. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise. You see, what's circumspectly? The word there, you got circum like a circumference, like all sides, spec like your eyes, your vision, and your spectacles. The idea is I'm on guard on all sides, as opposed to walking into something blindly. And so many Christians, we walk into things blindly because, let's face it, under the pure, all things are pure. We can't see the negative of that. We don't see there's a problem with that until later on we find out our child is overtaken by some addiction or they've developed some philosophy. Think, who are you? Raised up in my home, and where did you come up with these ideas, these philosophies, and so forth? And you never had their heart. So I want to get into this just a little bit. First of all, I want to talk about some of the blessings. There are blessings with social media. And like I said, technology advances. We can either just say all technology is evil and just kind of become Amish and just go live on a compound somewhere, which not a bad idea sometimes. I kind of think about, maybe we can just uproot the whole church and we'll just have our own little thing and, we'll have our own commune. That's very tempting because it's so crazy out there, right? It really is. But the reality is this is what our kids are growing up in, and it's not going away. And things are advancing at a crazy pace, and we need to be aware. We need to see what's going on and realize there are some blessings. In fact, I think about even today, right? This morning it was 45 below zero, and my wife's car would not start for anything. It would start, but then it would just sort of shut off. Like, I'm not playing this game. And I understand. I understand where you're coming from, car. But so my wife and kids were stuck at home. They got to watch the service on live stream. I remember during the COVID time, all of a sudden every preacher in America became a TV evangelist, all right? We used to preach against those guys. Now we are one. And but so there were some blessings with that. I saw a meme just the other day. And it showed a picture of an old telephone with a cord and everything. And it said, when telephones were tied to the wall, we were free. And I was like, man, there's some truth to that. If you're expecting an important call, guess what? You were staying home because you were expecting an important call, right? You want to make sure the line was clear before call waiting? Yeah, you're right? Because you get that busy signal. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Marion, you don't know what I'm talking about. She's like, Now, I will say this phone really has been a blessing. I've got my whole calendar here. On my iPad, I've got tons of my sermons I wrote on here. And sometimes God might lead and just, we're going to go in this direction, dig up that old sermon. Or if I'm preaching out somewhere, sometimes God will do that. I've got a whole library of sheet music in this thing. If it was the old days, I have to carry all kinds of folders, right? Now I can look them up, and they're all right there. I've got people's contacts. I've got all kinds of stuff. Boy, there's some dangers on this thing, though. Some incredible dangers. We got to be wise about that as we go into this. So I'm going to look at some of these blessings, or potential blessings for social networking. Here's a blessing: you can be a witness for Christ. If someone were to investigate your Facebook profile or whatever, and there were a look on there, would they walk away saying this person's a believer? Or would you just sort of blend in with the crowd? It's just something to think about, right? Am I giving enough evidence? One of the things that I've thought about often, at my funeral, I do not want my children to think, well, I think he was a Christian. We hope he's in heaven. I want there to be enough evidence that there's no doubt where my heart was. There's no doubt who my priority was and where my confidence laid. I want it to be a very obvious thing that this guy walked with God. That's what it was said of Enoch. Enoch walked with God. What a wonderful testimony. What a wonderful thing to be said about him. And I just wonder, it's amazing. You'll have some of these people. They'll post a Bible verse, and then they'll post some of the most vile filth. And then checked into church today, and then hey, look at this video. And you think, what in the world? You're all over the place. And so, what a great opportunity though to be a testimony for the Lord. And to even share the gospel, witness. It's wonderful to share articles and to share videos that are pointing people to the Lord. I think it'd be a good practice to this right now. We're going live on Facebook to go ahead and just click share every time. Hey, I want anyone else to tune in who may just be interested and it might just come across their feed and just hear what the Bible has to say about something. Here's another one. You can teach Bible principles. It's one reason I started the Unfeigned Faith blog and podcast, and there's a Facebook community, because I just want to be an encouragement to others. I want to help others along and teach past biblical principles along. Galatians 4:19, my little children, of whom I travailed in birth again until Christ be formed in you. That was Paul's desire for the Galatians. He was going to work at this thing. He was going to travail until there's a formulation of Christ in those that he was influencing. As Paul mentored Timothy, he explained each Christian's responsibility to pass on scriptural truths that they've been taught in 2 Timothy 2:2. And these things that thou hast heard among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who should be able to teach others also. You'll be able to pass on those things. Here's another blessing you can use your stuff for. Encourage others. Encourage others. When people come across your social media, do they see you always complaining about something? Some people, that's kind of what they use it for. It's their area to place to just sort of air their grievances. Oh, my boss this week. Oh, I went through this other difficulty. Now, I know sometimes we may just sort of go on there, hey, anybody out there need advice? Or could somebody pray for me? Right, those kinds of things. But you have to consider yourself. What is the tone? What is being portrayed there? We got to encourage others. Proverbs 25:11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. God commanded Moses to encourage Joshua as Joshua prepared to assume the leadership of Israel. And in Deuteronomy 3:28 says, but charge Joshua and encourage him and strengthen him, for he shall go over before this people, and he shall cause them to inherit the land which thou shalt see. And this idea of encouraging one another, that's what we're here for, to be a blessing, to be an encouragement, to lift others up. And people that are in your social networking, social media bubble or circle, sphere, are they encouraged by you? I'll be honest with you, there have been some people that I've unfriended over the years. Now, some of them, they were kind of strangers to begin with, but others were kind of close to me. But I'm like, you're bringing me down. I can't do this anymore. I have to unfriend, or I have to tell the algorithm to show less of them. So they're there if I need them, kind of a thing. That's a sad thing. Growth in communication technology has greatly enhanced our ability to encourage others. It can be a wonderful medium through which that we are in encouragement. Again, sharing articles and blogs and even writing things ourselves. Ephesians 4:29, that which talks about doing that which is good to the use of edifying that may minister grace to the hearers. And here's another blessing that I've experienced: communication with friends and co-laborers, and especially about the things of God. It's been such a blessing. There's been so many good people I've become in contact with that I've become really good friends over the years, missionaries and different folks. By the way, it's wonderful for missionaries. Missionaries, and a lot of them are still kind of in the old-fashioned way where they have to write out a letter and send it out every quarter to all the churches, and many of them never read it. It goes right to the trash can and all that. But what's neat about social media is they can put the same information on there, and the people that care about them, the people that are actually praying for them and those things, they're going to see it. And they can get those updates. And I shared with you guys the other day, I was really excited for one of my friends who was a church planner, and they've been meeting in a community center for years, and they were just given a church building. Man, I was excited about that. And he showed the picture. He goes, you guys have any ideas on how we can remodel this? Because it looked like it was straight out of the 70s. And I was like, what a problem to have. But a big, beautiful building. And I was like, man, I was rejoicing with him. I wouldn't have got that if it wasn't for the Facebook. He wasn't going to send me a letter or call me on the phone. Or just a wonderful thing for us to rejoice together. But, these edifying relationships and iron sharpening iron, I've had some wonderful discussions. I led someone to Christ through through social media one time. I reconnected with a friend from high school. He was in the Navy. I was in the Army. I was in Iraq, and he was in Greece. He made the better decision. And and I led him to Christ through the messenger part of I think that was still the MySpace day. Through the private messaging, and we were going back and forth, and I was sharing scriptures, And I remember one of the last ones, he said, so I want you to know, he said, I got on my face tonight and I called to Christ to save me. And it was such a joy. And this was just a lot of just back and forth over a period of several days. But he was won to Christ. How awesome. A great opportunity to stay connected with relatives around the world. Proverbs 25:25 tells us, as cold water to a thirsty soul, so good news from a far country. And tell you what, that's one thing. It's just been made it easy. You know, my parents can watch their grandkids from afar. And as we see, they see pictures posted and those things. What I'm saying is there's some blessings. There's some potential blessings. You can receive prayer updates. You know, there's a lot of groups online, Bible study groups, encouraging groups, prayer requests, those kinds of things. We can update. Even our church, we use the Signal app, right? And opportunity for updates of prayer requests or needs or, you know, what's going on with the church. We got a men's group, we've got the ladies group, we've got the whole church. And sometimes it can be a nuisance and annoying, but we're stay connected, right? How much easier than for me to go down the line and call everybody? You know, you doing okay? You doing okay? You doing okay? You doing okay? You know, but we can stay in touch that way. So with this, you know, it helps us to, you know, learn to be a blessing. Through online updates, we see the joy of how God is working in many different ministries and people around the world. Or we learn how rather God is blessing. We see the blessings around us, so we can practice Romans 12:15 to rejoice with them that do rejoice. As I mentioned earlier about my friend getting this building and so forth. It's an awesome opportunity. And so we got to uplift the biblical use of technology. Yes, there are principles, and it's amazing. The Bible speaks to all things. Jesus did not say, go ye therefore and use Facebook. He didn't say anything like that. But we can take principles that are laid out in Scripture and say, can I apply these to how I'm presenting myself? Listen, anything the Bible talks about our interactions with others, being the salt of the world, salt and light, and being a good testimony, being an ambassador for Lord Jesus Christ. Every time you get on there, you ought to ask yourself, how is my ambassadorship doing on this page? How am I reflecting Him? How am I being a good representative of the Lord Jesus Christ? And by the way, we ought to be an example for others. Young people and new Christians need a biblical example, a model of how to use technology appropriately. When godly Christians actively apply biblical principles to communication in the world of social media, their example teaches young people and new Christians that God's principles are timeless and applicable. Be ever mindful in all of your online communication that people are watching, they're studying your example. And so we have to live and communicate in such a way that our example is Christ-honoring. Ephesians 4:29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that may minister grace to the hearers. Again, they're watching. It breaks my heart. It's tough sometimes. You know, as a pastor, there have been times where some of the younger people in the church have, sent me a friend request and everything, and I'm like, all right. Because I want to encourage them as well, and especially nowadays, my account's private, so only my friends can see this stuff, and I want to be an encouragement and a blessing. Boy, sometimes it's heartbreaking. Some teenager, some young person, no one in this church yet, but all kinds of filth and everything on there, like, man, well, I hope I can be encouragement to them. Hope I can help them. But there's no filter and there's no reservation. I remember one night we were doing a spiritual warfare conference, and it was a 3-night thing that we were focusing on this. And that last night, we all got on our knees and we just did business with the Lord, and we were confessing things and closing doors and just saying, we just want this out of our lives. We want God, be fully surrendered to God, and areas potentially where the devil could have gotten a stronghold in lives. And we're getting serious. So people are on their faces, they're weeping before God, they're confessing sins, they're doing all kinds of stuff. And it was a powerful, powerful service. That night, a teenage girl in that church goes home and posts these lyrics from a secular rapper, talking about soul being possessed with the devil and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, she was just praying with the rest of us. She was just in that same service. It can be heartbreaking. But we want to be an example to others. You can strengthen godly relationships. Proverbs 27:17, it says, iron sharpeneth iron, and so the man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. And there's a great opportunity for that, to just be an encouragement, to be a help. We can exert godly influence in our world. Our world is in desperate need of biblical voice, like John the Baptist, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. And I tell you what, we need to, while it's somewhat free, lest you get put into Facebook jail, but we need to be an encouragement. We need to be saying, look, not everybody thinks this way, not everybody's going this way, but we're standing on truth, and we're being an encouragement, and we're saying, look, live for God. We're not falling into all these traps out there, and we got to challenge people in these areas. It's just a short list of some blessings. I'm sure we can come up with a few others. But secondly, I want to look at some potential pitfalls and downfalls. I've already mentioned a few, as they were kind of the antithesis of some of the blessings we were talking about. But any mode of communication can be used to propagate the gospel, edify believers, but it can also be used by Satan to propagate evil. It can turn things to darkness. And really, as God's children, we're going to communicate with others that we interact with through internet and technology. We need to recognize that we give an account for the words we speak. We give an account for the influence that we may have. Unfortunately, much of what Christians post on the internet today would fall into the category of maybe more idle words. As Jesus said to those Pharisees, he says, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. A lot of times it's just fluff. It's just emptiness. And I'm not saying that every single thing has to be just super spiritual. You ought to be preaching to all your friends all the time. But let me ask you, as you just kind of peruse through it, what is the overall atmosphere of these things? Of that little website dedicated to you? As a challenge. Here's one of the big pitfalls. Bragging and focusing on self. And why not? It's your page, right? I think it was very telling when it was called MySpace, because that's what it was. This is all about me. It's my space. Is it your space or is it God's space? It's Facebook. It's read my face like a book. Okay, this is who I am. This is my life. Read it like a book, and I'm putting it there out in front of you for all to see. And yes, of course, it's going to be value. You're posting pictures of you and your family and those kinds of things. Here's the challenge as a Christian: where do I find that balance? And what is the balance there? Am I going on here to brag and to say, look how wonderful my life is? And sometimes, by the way, it's really interesting, the articles and stuff that have come out of the rise of children committing suicide and teenagers committing suicide. And a lot of it comes back to the social media stuff. Because let's face it, on social media, you're putting your best face forward. Look how wonderful my life is. And many times they're overcompensating for how miserable their life probably is. But look how wonderful things are. Look at all the things they get to do and have and be. And then you're sitting at home thinking, oh, they're always on vacation. The Air Force is always sending them to Guam. I don't get to go to Guam. But you can even make Guam look good, okay? I mean, like you're on vacation, right? And you just don't. Who was it? Somebody was TDY to Hawaii, right? And I was like, just don't tell your wife you're having a good time, okay? Don't let her see your tan or any of that kind of stuff. And suffering for our country. But if we're not careful, it's almost like competition, right? They probably don't hear this phrase as much anymore, but how many of you know what I mean when I talk about keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like a competition with the neighbors kind of thing. If they got a newer car, I need a newer car. They have nicer things, we need nicer things. Their kids do all this stuff, our kids need to do all this stuff. We can really fall into that with social media. I need to do this. My wife and I, we struggle with it. Because my wife wants to be encouraging, wants to be a help and everything. And she's actually told me this. She said, I want to brag about that thing that you did for us. She's like, but I don't want to make other women feel bad because their husband's a deadbeat. Not in so many words, but there have been people that have told her that, like, oh, you're always showing that stuff again, oh, you got a great marriage. And it's like, that's the opposite effect that we're trying to have. We want to encourage people to have a good marriage and those kinds of things. Or, we finally got away on a vacation, and I want to tell you, look at the great time we're having as we're away. And Well, be careful, because you get resentful about those things. 1 Peter 5:5 instructs us to be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. There can be a pride and even a self-gratification, how many friends or followers we might have. Right? Yeah, a young person can have no friends at school, and they just can't wait to get home in their made-up world, and they got all these followers, and they want to see them gaming or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden they're a hero in their secret private world, but nobody knows them. Nobody cares about them. In fact, so much so that there have been people out there, somebody's down and depressed, and they might mention on the social media, that they're thinking about taking their life, and all of a sudden people get on there, well, just do it. Because they don't know you and they don't care about you. Why don't you go and talk to somebody who actually cares about you? How about this? When's the last time you talked to your parents? You see what I'm saying? We get so caught up in this made-up world that becomes reality. I don't know if it's still a thing or not. I know years ago there was a thing called Second Life. Everybody heard of Second Life? It was like this online gaming thing where you make up this character, and there were people that they had this whole Second Life developed in here, and they got like a job in this Second Life world and a family, and meanwhile their families behind them living life and growing up without them, and it's all this made up stuff. Like, what are we doing here? Mark 8:34, Jesus said, "Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." In your social media posts, are you practicing self-denial or self-promotion? Many have said, there's only two choices on the shelf, pleasing God or pleasing self. We ask the Lord to help us to exalt Him, to encourage others, and die to self, even on social media. Don't be concerned with your large audience, your follower. There's an amazing word today, I think I mentioned before. There's an amazing word today that I don't think we've ever used before, and that is influencer. Now listen, we're all influencers. You got to be influencing your family and those in your life to, we use the term edifying, encouraging, helping others, point them to Christ. But an influencer is somebody who has a bunch of followers online, and some of these people, they're not influencing anything. They're on there playing with toys, unboxing toys and clothes and all this stuff. Like, okay, what are you influencing? And bank account, yeah, because the more views, the more clicks, the more money. And but it's such a weird day we live in. I heard about this little girl in the Philippines, and she reviews toys. Manufacturers all send her all these toys, and she opens them up and reviews them and talks about them, and tons and tons of, she gets all kinds of views. Well, she came from kind of a poor family. She bought her family, I believe it was a $6 million home, 8 years old. Wow. I'm in the wrong line of business, I'll tell you that much. Tell you what, though, I'd rather be influencing people for eternity than influencing a couple of kids about toys. 2 Timothy 2:4, "No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, and they please him who has chosen him to be a soldier." Many who are involved in social media become entangled with the desires to please others rather than pleasing Christ. To look a certain way, come across a certain way. Here's another pitfall and a danger. Creation of a false identity. Is that really who you are? Sometimes, this is the thing with young people, they'll create a completely different persona. And let me just caution your parents. If you come across something like that, take that very seriously, because that's probably who they are right here. They've been putting on a show for you. You're going to church and all this kind of stuff. But what are they right here? Those are tough discussions to have. You start to realize, is that something you're really struggling with? All of a sudden they're talking to their friends about an eating disorder, gender confusion. You sit down talking with them, oh no, and they'll give you all the Bible answers. But what's really going on? Well, there's this made-up world of people that they don't even know, and they feel comfortable telling a stranger some things that you might not be comfortable telling your own parents. Let's make sure that we are developing those relationships and And parents, I'm preaching to myself here too. This is tough. I always said it'd be probably easiest to pastor and talk about parenting before I had kids and after my kids are out of the house. But while they're in the home, it's tough sometimes because I'll be honest with you, I have struggles with my kids. But don't let them be afraid to talk to you about tough things. Let them know it's okay. You're not going to be in trouble. I'm not going to think less of you. I'd rather you be open so we can talk through these things and get a good perspective on these things. Well, I didn't come to you because I knew you'd be all upset. Well, I can't control if I'm upset or not, but I'll control how I'm going to handle it with you. Try to get that communication open as much as possible. But this false identity, boy, it's an issue. You'll see church kids, they'll post a picture of, there's one time I was working with a youth group, and there were these kids that, they come from a very, very close family, very godly family, and they're always in church and all this stuff. And I don't know, he got a hold of a beer bottle or something, never drank in his life, and he's posting a picture of him with this beer bottle. It's like, what are you doing? You don't drink? Who are you trying to impress here? He's trying to create that false identity because maybe if he had the chance, he would. You see? Take those things seriously. But also with us, we need to be careful. And, things go beyond merely bragging, can become an obsession with this second online life. Don't fall into the trap. As God's children, our life should be authentic in every context. This is who I am. I am the real deal. 1 Corinthians 1:30. But of him are ye in Christ Jesus, who of God is made unto us wisdom and righteousness and sanctification and redemption. Think about who you really are and walk in that. Here's another great pitfall, and I think we can all see this, time wasting and distraction. You know what it becomes? It becomes sort of an escape from reality. I was listening to years ago, I'd listened to this one leadership podcast often, and eventually kind of started just going in a direction I wasn't getting anything out of it. But I remember this one interview came out shortly after the Apple Watch came out. And he was talking about the benefits of the Apple Watch. And he said, one of the great benefits of the Apple Watch is it'll tell you the time. It's a novel idea. Kind of going backwards here, aren't we? And here's what he said. He said, how often do you pull out your phone to check the time? And next thing you know, I got a notification. Oh, I'm checking Facebook. Oh, I'm checking it. And then 5 minutes goes by. You put your phone down. You try to get back to work, and you realize, I never checked the time. So you pull your phone back out, and you start the cycle all over again. He said the Apple Watch lets you tell the time and keep working. And I found this to be true. I'm not wearing it right now, but you get a notification or you get a call or whatever. You look on it. Okay, and I can keep going. It's going to stay a fresh thing, but I know what it was. It's not something that needs my immediate attention right now, and I can keep working. I found that to be very beneficial. But how much of this is just time wasting? When many of these things were designed to help us with it. I had heard that that Bill Gates and possibly I think Steve Jobs might have been this way as well. They didn't let their kids have these devices. They knew exactly what they were. Yeah, they made them millions. They knew exactly what these things were. And they knew exactly how to play into what people are wanting and will pay for. And he said to his family, nope, can't have one. It was great. I guess Bill Gates caught his wife with an iPhone, and that was the end of that. But they're time wasters. Ben Franklin said, time is the stuff that life is made of, therefore do not squander it. How much of this is just designed for time? I think that is one of the greatest tools of the devil, to get God's people to simply waste time. Time is one resource that we all have equally. And we can just waste some time. Many companies don't allow their employees to access social media at work because of the loss in productivity. Some companies require that they have access to, or that you give them all of your accounts so they can see how you are online. And by the way, think about that. Anybody can search your name, Google your name and all that. You're applying for a job and whatnot. How do you appear online? Think about communication interruptions. There are a few things more frustrating than attempting a conversation with a teenager who's obsessed with their text messages or whatever else it is, and you're talking to somebody and they're like, yeah. Well, put that down. And by the way, if you're talking to somebody and you have Bluetooth earbuds in, there may be nothing on there, but if somebody's talking to you, take that thing out. Let the person know they have your attention. That drives me crazy. You're not so important. You're not going to just get an important call right in the middle of our conversation, all right? Well, the president might call. I'm sure. We need to just get back to learning how to interact with people, right? We've created such a weird thing. Remember, I'm kind of sharing just a lot of... Do you remember back in the day, somebody knock at your door, you were so excited to go see who it was. Today, someone knocks at your door, you go hide under the couch. You're like, what has changed? I think it's this. Before we like surprises, now there's no surprises because, you should have called first. You should have texted. You should have let me know. You don't just show up to someone's house unannounced. Right. That used to be the norm. Right? I remember I followed up at a visitor's house one time. I brought a pie and a thank you note, knocked on the door, and I heard, who is it? And I said, it's Pastor Richert from the church you visited on Sunday. Just wanted to say hi. Well, you just lost any chance of me coming back to your church. This pie's all for me, I guess. I'm like, okay. Here's another one, pitfall. And some of this may be more geared towards young people. I think all these have potential for all of us, but materialism. If we step back and surveyed your social media, what would we find? Would we find you're more focused on material or spiritual aspects of your life? A lot of people, they're putting up their favorite brands of clothing and entertainment and all these kinds of things, and many of those things are much more important than God in their life. Where people hop on there and say, wow, here's what, this person got a lot out of the church they went to today. Or we run home and say, I can't wait for the newest whatever movie to come out. You see. All I'm saying is there's something on there that we are portraying. Are you uplifting and promoting Christ? Or or the things, many times in this world, the material things that we are so interested in. 3 John 9 reminds us that a man named Diotrephes said of him that he loveth to have the preeminence among them. He was known to have it all about him, to be the center. And I think part of that was that he made it all about him rather than about Christ. That was Diotrephes' problem. He confused, he was consumed with himself, needing to be the center of everything. It's easy to focus on all these temporal things and to really get away from the whole reason we're here. Whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. Hebrews 13:5. Let your conversation be without covetousness. Your lifestyle, your manner of living, the things you talk about, the things you do, without covetousness, and be content with such things as you have. Why? For he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. In other words, Christ should be our contentment. If I have Christ, I have everything. And we've lost the excitement of that. This morning, I think people are still thawing off, and we tried singing, Since Jesus Came Into My Heart. And it was like a funeral march. And I had to jump up here, guys, aren't you excited about this? Think about what we're singing about. Floods of joy on my soul, like the sea billows roll, since Jesus came into my heart. Oh, I'm so excited about my salvation. Isn't it good to be saved? What? Is it good to be saved? I mean, do your friends think you're excited about being a Christian, or it's a drag to be a Christian? Well, I'm glad I'm not a Christian like that guy. He can't do anything. I wish my parents would let me go to the movies. I wish my parents would let me do this, that, and the other thing. Oh yeah, your Christian, your lost friends are real excited about your Christian family, aren't they? Just think about these things. Here's a potential downfall, or a pitfall, is a lack of a Christ-centered discussion. We can so easily get drawn into these carnal things. Sometimes sinful, sometimes just vain, empty, nothing. 1 Corinthians 15:33, be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. It'd be wise to view all of your online posts in this light. Could I share this in the presence of Jesus? By the way, Jesus has the internet too. He sees Facebook. He sees all those things. I don't think he has an account on there, but he can get on there anyway.
I think there is a God on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm sure. In the Philippines, yeah. Colossians 1:18. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. All things, by the way, includes web things. Think about the public nature of posts. Proverbs 13:3. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. How many of you have posted something and deleted it 15 seconds later? I should have done that. Yeah. That's another danger, right? Abraham Lincoln was known, he had a lot of critics. And he was known to receive letters and criticisms and stuff. And he'd sit down and he would write a letter of response. And then he would stick it in the top drawer of his desk and never do anything with it again. That'd be good practice, wouldn't it? I think the instant ability to respond sometimes really gets us into trouble. I've done it. I've fallen into those online debates, and I've come to realize, this is no good. Do you remember Jesus in his ministry? They come to Jesus, and they asked him this question, and I don't know about you, but if I was the Son of God, and you asked me where my authority comes from to do these things, Jesus, who spoke the world into existence. Now, this is me, but that's because I'm full of pride and flesh. Jesus was sinless. But if you came to me, I'm the Son of God, and you say, who gives you this authority? I would do what James and John wanted to do. I'd call down fire from heaven and strike them down dead right there, and I'd look around and say, any other questions where my authority comes from? But what would that have done to all the onlookers? Many of the discussions that Jesus got into with those Pharisees was not because he was going to convince those Pharisees. They were stuck in their ways. Jesus was teaching those that were just watching. And so many times in some of these discussions, you're not going to convince that guy, but there are other people that are watching. So you have to ask yourself, am I trying to win this argument or am I trying to win these people? You see? And so think about that. Keep them hungry for more. I've had people reach out to me privately because of the discussions, say, hey, could you talk to me more about that thing? I wrote an article one time about a biblical, it was something about a biblical perspective of Pride Month, or God's view on Pride Month, or something like that. I did this whole article on it. And a guy reached out to me who struggled. He was a Christian, but he struggled with same-sex attraction. And we went back and forth for quite a while and just trying to encourage him and discussing things and sharing verses. And he kind of shared his story and his testimony. And I wanted to make sure he was saved and really knew the Lord. And it was wonderful. Sometimes people will blast things on there on like the YouTube channel. I turned off comments on our YouTube channel because it's like, this is not the place for that. I'm not going to debate you through the comment section. You have no idea how many hits my message on Israel got. Should a Christian support Israel? That's our one video that went viral, and there were a lot of comments that I had deleted. But the public nature of it, people are watching. Here's something else to think about. Once it's out there, it's out there. You may delete it, but it could keep going. Ask yourself this question: will I someday wish I could retract this comment, or will I be embarrassed if there was another audience that read this thing? Some things to ask yourself. How about this? Gossip. Online conversation reveals one's heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. The danger and potential to fall into to gossip. Charles Spurgeon once said this. He said, he quoted Titus 3:9, but avoid foolish questions and genealogies and contentions and strive about the law, for they are unprofitable and vain. Here's what Spurgeon said. Our days are few and are far better spent in doing good than in disputing over matters which are at best of minor importance. The old schoolmen did a world of mischief by their incessant discussion of subjects of no practical importance, and our churches suffer much from petty wars over abstruse points and unimportant questions. After everything has been said, can it be said, neither party is any wiser, and therefore the discussion no more promotes knowledge than love, and is foolish and to sow in so barren a field. Questions upon points where Scripture is silent, upon mysteries which belong to God alone, upon prophecies of doubtful interpretation, and upon mere modes of observing human ceremonials, are all foolish, and wise men avoid them. Our business is neither to ask nor to answer foolish questions, but to avoid them altogether. And if we observe the apostles' precepts in Titus 3:8, to be careful to maintain good works, we shall find ourselves far too much occupied with profitable business to take much interest in unworthy, contentious, and needless strivings. There are, however, some questions which are the reverse of foolish, which we must not avoid, but fairly and honestly meet. Such are these. Do I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ? Am I renewed in the spirit of my mind? Am I walking not after the flesh, but after the Spirit? Am I growing in grace? Does my conversation adorn the doctrine of God my Savior? Am I looking for the coming of the Lord and watching as a servant should do who expects his master? What more can I do for Jesus? Such inquiries as these urgently demand our attention, and if we have been at all given to cavilling, let us Spurgeon, the way he spoke, let us now turn our critical abilities to a service so much more profitable. Let us be peacemakers. Endeavor to lead others both to our precept and example, to avoid foolish questions. I think that is well said. Of course, anything Spurgeon says is well said. You might want to use this acronym when you post stuff. Use the acronym THINK. That should cause you to think. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? Think. We got to consider some of these things. 1 Thessalonians 5:15, see that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to use to edify and administer grace to the hearers. There's potential for improper male-female relationships. I'm not going to dive deep into this, but how many people have reconnected with their high school sweetheart or relationships in the past, and now they're communicating back and forth, and it rekindles stuff, and there is story after story after story of such things. Or somebody not happy with their spouse, and now this affair has been mustered up, or again the nature of being able to put together this false life, this false narrative. You know, I'm a single successful man. You know, then why are you looking here? Okay, but be so careful with these things. We ought to remain accountable. In some cases, social networking has pulled down the walls of safety and accountability, leaving singles and spouses alike vulnerable to improper relationships. Make it your goal that your social network would clearly reflect the purity of Christ, and that would include everybody in your family. Christians should heed 1 Timothy 3:9, holding the mystery of the faith in a pure conscience. Of course, there's the danger of sexual predators. And that is a very real threat, and really we need to really work with our kids about this. Our kids are not allowed to engage with anybody that we don't know in any way, in any form. We've had to kind of alter it as they're getting older, and they have to be online more and different things, and the way we approach it. But they're in a world of trouble if we find somebody that I don't know who it is. And it's tough sometimes because everybody has a handle. You know, who's who's this person? Oh, that's so and so. You sure? Is it really? You know, is that a boy or a girl? There's a good one. Sadie was talking back and forth with somebody. I was like, this could go one of two ways depending on what the gender is right now. And so ask us questions, be involved. Romans 16:19, I would have you wise unto that which is good and simple concerning evil. You know, and it goes back to the simple thing. Hey, don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to strangers, right? I know it sounds like, a 15-year-old boy who understands, where you're coming from, but it's probably some 50-year-old man, 60-year-old man. Be careful. Be careful. And we got to talk about those things, have discussions. You can fall into the trap of associating with the wrong crowd. All right. By the way, when you join groups on Facebook, people can see which groups you're a part of. There may be a private group. You may not be able to see the group, but they can see what groups you're a part of. I called somebody one time because it showed a video that they liked. So-and-so liked this video, and it was not a good video. And I called them. I said, just so you know, I could see the video you liked. Just be aware of that. And I told them, be aware of that. I've been concerned. I panicked, right? I've been scrolling before, and my finger actually hit the like. And I go unlike. I'm like, oh, I hope nobody saw me like that. So if you guys saw it, that's what happened, okay? Others see. But think about this associated with the wrong crowds. You ever, when you were a kid, did you wish you were in that certain crowd? See, social media, you can now be in these crowds. And so guard that, be careful with that. Psalm 1:1, blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. See, you're going to become like those you follow, those you hang around. Here's another one, another pitfall. Online philosophy can become reality. Think about all the things that go around. I'll tell you what, minority opinions in our country seem like majority opinions because of the use of media. Have you noticed that? Well, the whole country believes this. I don't think so. The whole country approves of this. I don't think so. Joe Biden's the most popular president of all time. Yeah, he doesn't know he's president. That's how good he's doing. John 3:11, beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. Here's one. You can become a stumbling block for others. That's a great pitfall, and we are here to lift up others and to encourage others. 1 Corinthians 8:13. Wherefore, if meat make my brother to offend, I will not eat flesh while the world standeth, lest I make my brother to offend. That's such a powerful verse that Paul says. In other words, what he's saying is, if me eating meat and enjoying that liberty causes someone else to offend or to stumble or to fall, I won't eat meat the rest of my life. What a conviction! While the world stands, that's what that phrase means. While the world still exists, while the rest of my life. So you got to ask this question, is there anything with my online activity that would cause a weaker Christian to stumble who's watching me? Right? It's amazing to me. Christians, I had a wonderful time in church, and then the next post, they're out drunk with their friends. What are you doing? What are you doing? These pitfalls are not new or unique with social networking, but it's really made it so in the forefront. Let me just give you a couple principles regarding social networking, and we'll be done. Some things to consider. As technology is growing faster than really we could have ever dreamed it would have, and definitely our grandparents ever would have dreamed it would have. It's with us. And I tell you what, we got to keep on guard on top of this. And I'm very thankful. There are those that are really giving themselves to find out what are the latest, what are the things. Those apps that are disguised to be one thing that are something else? It looks like a calculator, but it's some kind of secret social networking thing, right? There are people that commit themselves to discovering those things. As parents, we got to be wise about that, and we got to follow along, see what's out there, and get with other parents and to be able to help us with those things. But here's some things when we consider our online things. Express humility. Listen, I know it's super exciting. You got that promotion. You can share that so this can rejoice with you in a way that is humble. Express humility. Think about this. And by the way, one great way of expressing humility is passing on the blessing or passing on the compliment. When somebody compliments you, pass the thing along. A young person, she shows up to church and her hair is done all pretty. Oh, you look so pretty today. Here's a great pattern. Oh, thank you. My mother taught me how to do my hair. What did they do? They passed it on. Passed it along, right? Oh man, congratulations on that promotion. People, my coworkers, people I work with, they've been such a help in getting me here. God has given me such great opportunities to accomplish this, to get here. You see, that's tough. Sometimes it's really tough. But what do? You're being humble about it, because these things are all true. By the way, it's not a false humility. These things are all true. We need to recognize it. Every good and perfect gift comes from above. No, I did this. Yeah? Who gave you the power to do that? Who gave you the strength? That's what God said to Israel. And they said, we did this. No. Who gave you the power to do that, to get wealth? You see, express humility. So what we'll do is we'll put on there, hashtag humble brag. No, it's not a humble brag. James 4:10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Deflect praise. That's what I was talking about. Deflect praise. Pass that praise along to somewhere else. Pride, of course, was the downfall of Lucifer. Pride is really the root of any sins that we fall into. It's pride. Thinking I know best. 1 Corinthians 10:31, as we read earlier, whether you eat or drink, whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. Engage people in ministry. It'll never replace face-to-face, by the way, and I do believe God's desire is that face-to-face kind of a thing. But this is given really a worldwide reach. I remember when I was in Southern California planting a church, the small church, we started posting our sermons, not video, but audio on a podcast and things. And some guy in Florida stumbled across it. He was searching for some topic that I was preaching on, and he started listening to every one of my sermons. He contacts me and he said, I listened to about 4 sermons a day from you. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Why are you doing this to yourself? But it was impacting him. So all of a sudden, my ministry is now going national. Then someone from Mexico starts listening. Now I'm international. And not about that. What I'm saying is great opportunity to impact people beyond just your next door. But do not neglect your next door. And where God has planted us, I still believe God wants a ministry to be local. And you think about the local church, but we got to be engaging people in ministry and don't let it take the place of that. There's a real issue out there. There are people that are armchair theologians. They sit there behind a desk and they blog and they do all this stuff, but they've never won a person to Christ. They're not doing anything for the Lord. They're an armchair theologian. Or here's another one: internet pastor. Have you ever heard that term, an internet pastor? I'm an online pastor. Oh, where do you go to church? I go to church online with this guy who does these Bible studies online. Now, I'm thankful for all those resources, wonderful resources out there, but let me just say, that's not church. That's not church. Not forsaking the assembling. That's what the definition of church is. It's an assembly. Not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, so much the more you see the day approaching. And we can't neglect real ministry. We got to give priority to the local church ministry. As I mentioned, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves. We got to be real, be authentic, be real, the real you. And if what's coming out is the real you and it's filthy and vile and things you'd be ashamed of, then it's time to let God start working on your heart. It's time to start bringing those before Him. God, this revealed me. This showed some things that I was not aware of. And boy, I need to be changed. I need to grow. Proverbs 15:3. The eyes of the Lord in every place beholding the evil and the good. Numbers 32:23, be sure your sin will find you out. That admonition there to the 2.5 tribes of Israel that were on the other side said, if you don't come and fight with your brethren, you'll be found out. And so it is with believers. Let me just tell you how many times my sins have found me out. And I'm sure we can all go around and share testimony of times our sin found us out. And what I'm saying is be real. Walk with God. Show the real you. Have a positive impact on others. And then avoid the very appearance of evil. 1 Thessalonians 5:22, abstain from all appearance of evil. And then, not everything is going to have a black and white principle, so defer to God-given authorities. God's given people in our lives, and this especially is true for younger people. Defer to God-given authorities. Sometimes there are things that are just kind of questionable. You don't have a direct principle. Defer to your authorities. It's going to be safe. It may not be doctrine, but it's safe. Amen? That's going to be helpful. And then be actively involved in your children's activities. Parents, be involved in your children's activity. There should be nothing going on in your child's life that you're unaware of, that you'd be surprised of. Boy, I've heard stories of people that go into the kids' room. I didn't even know they had that. Well, you should have. I like to give them their privacy. They're a child under your roof. They have no privacy. Okay? Kids say, well, this is my room. No, I'm letting you stay in my room. This is my room. And if you keep it up, I'm removing that door. I've done that. Anyways. Oh, I got to change. Go change in the bathroom. Okay. And then stay accountable to your family. Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rules of darkness in this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. No husband or wife should have an online account, email, or social connection that is not shared with their spouse. No child should have a connection that isn't accessible to the parents. Parents, you ought to have every password, all that kind of stuff. In fact, you ought to put a password on their computer that you have to give approval for them to even get on their computer every time they get on. My opinion. James 5:16, confess your faults to one another, pray for one another that you might be healed. We ought to have an open heart, and especially spouses. Let each other know of your struggles. It'd be better to know ahead of time so you can work together than to find out stuff later on. And then practice moderation. Social networking brings with it some real addictive tendencies. We got to practice moderation. Sometimes we may do a media fast. That's a healthy practice. Purge yourself of that stuff. It's amazing when you see you can tell a teenager's addicted to it is when you take their phone away, the way they react. It's like drug withdrawals. You see, that's a problem. Let your moderation be known to all men. I see some parents poking some kids here. But moderation. It carries the idea of appropriateness. Set some limits. We ought to pray with Paul that our love may abound more and more in the knowledge and in all judgment, that ye may approve things that are excellent, that ye may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ. Philippians 1, 9 and 10. So I know I went a little long, but there's a lot of principles there that we got to be very mindful and to actively engage when we consider social media. Excuse me. It's not going away, and it's only getting worse. And so we got to be think about it. Talk about it with your family. Sit down and figure out some principles, how you're going to run some things. And by the way, let me just say this. It's very wise, parents, but really everybody in here, that you have some accountability with your online activity. There's some great software out there. Covenant Eyes is a good one. What's the one you guys use?
Covenant Eyes is good for accountability.
Custodio is for Custodio? Okay. Give it Ryan if you're interested in that one. But be able to have control on what they have access to and those kinds of things. It's important to stay on top of it. Kids have become so tech savvy, and they can hack things, they can get around things, and we have to do everything we can to try to guide them. You say, well, isn't it better just to teach them to do the right thing? Yeah, but let me tell you, they're not ready for war yet. Yes, teach them the right thing, but they're not ready for war. They're still developing. And there's a lot of curiosity and there's a lot of hormones. And so we guard them while we train them. Amen? As the Connolly's son was training down there in Texas, they didn't send him to the Middle East to train. They sent him to Texas to train because he's not ready for what's going on in the Middle East. You see what I'm saying? The parents will say, I send my kid to public school so he can be a missionary. He's not ready. He's not ready for that. We're training them right now. One day they will be. Amen?